Semiotics. The field of semiotics deals with the study of signs. And a sign is defined in different ways depending on the person in the field whom you're studying. Two people, Ferdinand de Saussure and Charles Peirce, are considered the two founders of the field of semiotics. In short, a sign involves one thing that stands for another thing. Now let's consider Saussure and Peirce separately. Saussure built a sign out of something called a signified and a signifier. For example, I might look at the sketch of a lion, and this sketch points to or represents an actual lion, or perhaps the mental image of a lion. Peirce, on the other hand, complicates this a little bit by adding a third concept. He first begins with the representamen, which is a little bit difficult to say correctly. Then he has the interpretant and the object. Now, the representamen is what Saussure is referring to as the signifier. The object is the thing or the object to which the sign actually refers, so that's similar to the signified in Saussure's terminology. And finally, there's the interpretant, and this can be defined in many different ways, but usually can be seen as the act or the process of making the sign. One of the best online resources for semiotics is Daniel Chandler's Semiotics for Beginners, and we're going to be taking a few snippets from his website in describing some of the terms for semiotics. So if we take a look at Saussure's signifier and signified, it can be represented visually in many different ways, but this is one way to visualize it, that you've got the signifier, and then you have the thing that is being signified, and so this is considered a dyad, as opposed to the triad, which is what Peirce has, because he's got three instead of two concepts that make up the sign. Now, if we go ahead down here a little bit, well, first of all, we can stop there. This is the dyadic relationship of Saussure. The sign is a piece of paper that has this word on it. Okay, so this is the signifier as represented up here in this diagram. And then the signified is what the person imagines to be a tree. Or if you want to extend this a little bit, it certainly doesn't have to be a mental concept. It could also be a specific tree or the class of trees. Now if we go down to Peirce's triad, we're going to go ahead and zoom down into this. Then Peirce's triad can be looked at in several different ways, but one way is as represented by this rectangle right here. And these are using a little bit different terms than Peirce used. But this variant, we've got sense, sign vehicle, and referent. So sign vehicle is the form of the sign. Sense is the sense made of the sign. And referent is what the sign stands for. In most interpretations, there's a physical object that captures the concept of sign. This agrees with our common usage of the term sign. For example, you see a sign on a TV set, a newspaper, or a billboard that points to a candy bar. The sign is created from a physical medium. There's also the thing being referred to, but this thing can be a physical or a mental concept. Moreover, it may be that a singular object or a class or set of objects is the thing being referred to. For example, if you see a sketch of a lion and you call this a sign, this may point to a set of lions rather, or the category of lions rather than one particular lion. So clearly there are processes involved in signs, making them and interpreting them. And this is what Peirce is getting at with the interpretant. Now let's go ahead and look at three important types of signs. First, we have the iconic. And the iconic is where the signifier resembles that of the signified through the senses. I'll give examples of this in a moment. We have indexical signs, or index, and that's where the signifier is connected in some way through perhaps cause or an attribute of the signified, or to the signified. And we have symbolic, where the signifier has an arbitrary relation to the signified. Let's go through Chandler's example and description of the three kinds of signs. Okay, going in reverse to the way we just previously described them, let's start with the order in which he has them here. You've got a symbol. A symbol is the mode in which the signifier does not resemble the signified. So there's an arbitrary or a conventional representation. For instance, if you have a sign that looks like this, then this particular sign could represent anything. Let's say that it represents warning or watch out, be careful. It could represent that, it could represent something else. It really depends on the society that created this sign in the first place and the semantics that they want to attach to it. So this is what's meant by symbolic. Symbolic simply means that you've got, symbol doesn't necessarily mean typographic or textual. It purely means a picture of something, whether that something is a letter or whether that something is the kind of picture that you're more familiar with that may be non-typographic, like this one. And so we have this points to or signifies a warning situation. So this is a purely arbitrary or conventional sign. We call that the symbol. Now the next thing is the iconic or icon. Icon is where you have a sign like this one right here that actually looks like, or it doesn't have to actually be the visual sense, it could be the oral sense too. Something may sound like something. But in this case, we just have a visual icon. So this looks like William Shakespeare, or presumably it looked like him. And so this is called an icon type of sign. So clearly there's a lot of, if we take a look at the realm of art, most art, especially the non-modernist type, is clearly iconic because it's meant to actually represent something visually. Now modern art is a different story, and that's where we can get into indexical or symbolic types of signs. So let's go ahead and take a look at index now. Index is a little bit different. To read from Chandler's page, indexical mode is a mode in which the signifier is not arbitrary but directly connected in some way physically or causally to the signified. So for instance, if you take a look at these footprints, they indicate through cause that there was a human walking on the beach because they look like human footprints. It's not that we see a picture of a human walking on the beach, as you have for instance here. And it's not that there is an arbitrary conventional sign that represents that humans are walking on the beach, which might be a symbol that we might create for it up here. It's that this is an index that points to the fact that humans are walking on the beach. So it's an indexical or index-based sign. So to go ahead and summarize this, icon is a picture of someone, blueprint of a house. Perhaps international signs. They actually look like or sound like the thing that they're referring to. Examples of indices are all over the place. Could be a weather vane, empty plate, laughter, something that points to, as in index finger, something that points to something else. And symbolic, the kinds of signs you find in natural language. All of the little letters that we use in natural language are in fact symbols. Mathematics, the pictures that are used in mathematics are symbolic. Computer languages are also symbolic. Again, an important distinction. You may come to think, you may have thought, for instance, that symbol meant textual symbol. But the word symbol is really broader than just text. It could be a pictorial symbol, need not be text. So we can see that there is a distance relation between signs acting as icons and those as symbols. Icons are closest to our human abilities to perceive. As an example, again, this looks like William Shakespeare. Or a painting of a tree, it looks like a tree. Or the sound of a bird, if it sounds like a bird, if it rings with your perception of what a bird sounds like, then it's an iconic sign. And symbols are artifacts that we create to achieve both natural and artificial language. Now, in computer simulation, we create models for many different purposes. And the idea of models represent the structure of these learning modules that we're going over. So the models as well as components are signs. The signifiers in modeling are entities or components that make up a model. Two particular kinds of models that we may be familiar with are geometric modeling, and that's where signified elements are physical objects. So you've got signifiers, but the signified elements are physical objects, components, and geometric constraints. Whereas in simulation, we often deal with dynamic models and dynamic modeling, where signified elements include systems theoretic terms that have a dynamic sense of semantics, such as input, state, event, function, and output. Notice I didn't say anything about the signifiers. There can be many different ways of presenting or representing a model structure with text, 2D, or 3D objects. But it's the signified elements that I'm referring to here. The things that are being signified both by that text or those 2D or 3D objects. Let's go ahead and consider an object. Consider a light bulb. A light bulb has certain dynamics. Light bulb can turn on and off based on input to it in the form of the pull chain. And now what we want to do is describe models for this light bulb object. So one kind of overarching or more encompassing umbrella organization for talking about models is the Semantic Network, which is a concept that is found within cognitive science and artificial intelligence. So what we can do is we can connect all our models together. We can say there's a real-world light bulb out there, as indicated by the previous picture. And then we can put our semantics in terms of relations on the arcs, and we can say that that real-world light bulb has a dynamic model, or has underscore model, which is the relation, dynamics, which is an attribute referring to the type, FSM for finite state machine. So the way to read this node in the semantic network and this node and then the relation is that the real-world light bulb has a dynamic model, which is an FSM, or a finite state machine. Now, there are many different ways of actually presenting or representing the finite state machine. We could say that the style of the finite state machine is textual, or a symbols in the form of text. And we may have our description of the finite state machine using Latin and Greek letters. Similarly, we might have a two-dimensional finite state machine, or 2D FSM. Or we might create a 3D FSM. And in this particular picture, there are three kinds of styles for 3D FSMs. One using red spheres and green pipes, another using tanks with pipes, and water flow that flows from one tank to the next, representing a state-to-state transition in the finite state machine. And here there might be a set of gazebos or circular architectural structures where a person moves from one structure to the next, designating a state change. So the point here is that there are many different ways of looking at the model. We can represent a model in a language such as XML, or extensible modeling language, but then present it in many different ways. It doesn't have to have the same look and feel and sound. Now, if we take a look at the semantic network over here, we're just saying that there are many different model types. It doesn't have to be a dynamic model we're interested in, although that's the nature of this course. We may be interested in a scale model of the light bulb. And the scale model then is going to be similar to the picture that we just showed before getting to this. An important aspect of models is that the so-called real, quote-unquote, world light bulb can only be known through its models. That is, anything that you might find in front of you or that you might think about that exists in the real world, or in perhaps a fictional world, can be known only through the models that you make of it. And as we can see in this slide, there are many different ways in which you might present such models. And each model that you might present comes with its own metaphor, or set of metaphors. Now, if we take our discussion of semiotics as we just had and relate it to this picture, this kind of model, the scale model, is an iconic sign. So this is a type of icon. Looks like a light bulb. And therefore it's an iconic type of sign. Whereas we take a look at these signs down here, or the signs that go into making these particular models, they're all symbolic because each of these little teeny pictures in here does not have an indexical, nor does it have an iconic relationship to the thing being referred to. Of course, the thing being referred to in dynamic models tends to be fairly abstract in any case. Again, state, event, and so forth. These tend to be very abstract concepts. Now, we don't represent an indexical sign in this, but it's easy to create one. Consider any attribute of the light bulb, such as what causes it to turn on and off, or what it's made of, or its color. These attributes serve as indexical cues to the light bulb itself. So example, a yellow square could serve as an indexical sign, since it shows the color of the light bulb when it's turned on. Thus, it bears a relation to the light bulb that is not purely arbitrary, unlike a symbolic sign, which is arbitrary.